These are the basic components of a logic model. The first are resources. These are the materials to create the program, implement its activities, and attain desired outputs and outcomes. Examples include material or non-material resources such as facilities, funding, curricula, community support, and time. The next, activities, are the processes, actions, and events through which the program resources attain the intended outcomes. So in other words, they're the steps for program implementation. Examples include conducting training and analyzing student data. Outputs are process-oriented results or products of the program, typically expressed in numbers, like the number of students tested or the number of teachers or parents trained. They don't tell you if a change occurred from the program. And finally, impacts on outcomes include long-term outcomes and represent changes in program participants' knowledge, beliefs, or behavior, such as higher achievement rates, higher graduation rates, and higher college acceptance rates. One can see how these components correspond to selection criteria in the HEPCamp competition, not only in the categories of adequacy of resources, project design, and project evaluation, but also in the management plan and services. Quality of project services. The Secretary considers the quality of the services to be provided by the proposed project. In determining the quality of the services to be provided by the proposed project, the Secretary considers the quality and sufficiency of strategies for ensuring equal access and treatment for eligible project participants who are members of groups that have traditionally been underrepresented based on race, color, national origin, gender, age, or disability, up to 3 points. In addition, the Secretary considers the following factors: the extent to which the services to be provided by the proposed project are appropriate to the needs of the intended recipients or beneficiaries of those services, up to 7 points. The extent to which the services to be provided by the proposed project involve the collaboration of appropriate partners for maximizing the effectiveness of project services, up to 7 points, and the likely impact of the services to be provided by the proposed project on the intended recipients of those services, up to 7 points. Quality of project personnel. The Secretary considers the quality of the personnel that would carry out the proposed project. In determining the quality of project personnel, the Secretary considers the extent to which the applicant encourages applications for employment from persons who are members of groups that have been traditionally underrepresented based on race, color, national origin, gender, age, or disability, up to 3 points. In addition, the Secretary considers the qualifications, including relevant training and experience of key project personnel, up to 7 points. Notes on project personnel. Please note that applicants are responsible for defining and identifying all key personnel positions in their applications. An external evaluator is not required, and OME cannot say that one manner of evaluation is preferred over another. An applicant should conduct its evaluation in the manner that it determines to be most effective for the project. Anecdotally, many grantees find an outside evaluator to be an effective practice. Adequacy of resources. This is the adequacy of support, including facilities, equipment, supplies, and other resources from the applicant organization or the lead applicant organization, up to 4 points. The relevance and demonstrated commitment of each partner in the proposed project to the implementation and success of the project, up to 4 points. And the extent to which the costs are reasonable in relation to the objectives, design, and potential significance of the proposed project, up to 4 points. Please note, when addressing this criterion, applicants may want to consider program regulations, which requires applicants to develop and implement a plan for identifying and using the resources of the participating IHE and the community to supplement and enhance the services provided by the project. If some of these are provided through non-federal funds, you still must address them here, and furthermore, you must address them in the budget narrative that explains how you will use both federal and non-federal funds. Quality of the project evaluation. This is the extent to which the methods of evaluation are thorough, feasible, and appropriate to the goals, objectives, and outcomes of the proposed project, up to 10 points. The extent to which the methods of evaluation will provide performance feedback and permit periodic assessment of progress toward achieving intended outcomes, up to 5 points. The extent to which the methods of evaluation will, if well implemented, produce promising evidence about the project's effectiveness, up to 5 points. Please note, a strong evaluation plan should be included in the application narrative and should be used as appropriate to shape the development of the project from the beginning of the grant period. The plan should include benchmarks to monitor progress towards specific project objectives and outcome measures to assess the impact on important outcomes for project participants. More specifically, the plan should identify the individual and/or organization that have agreed to serve as evaluator for the project and describe the qualifications of that evaluator. As always, please refer to the NIA and application package for additional details. Promising evidence. Promising evidence means that there's evidence of the effectiveness of a key project component in improving a relevant outcome based on a relevant finding from one of the following. A practice guide prepared by the What Works Clearinghouse reporting a strong evidence base or moderate evidence base for the corresponding practice guide recommendation. An intervention report prepared by the What Works Clearinghouse reporting a positive effect or potentially positive effect on a relevant outcome with no reporting of a negative effect or potentially negative effect on a relevant outcome. Or a single study assessed by the department as appropriate that A, is an experimental study, a quasi-experimental design study, or well-designed and well-implemented correlational study with statistical controls for selection bias, such as a study using regression methods to account for differences between a treatment group and a comparison group. And B, includes at least one statistically significant and positive or favorable effect on a relevant outcome. There are regulatory definitions for phrases in promising evidence, such as correlational study, quasi-experimental study, and experimental study. These are some of the key terms from the promising evidence definition. Understanding them will help you understand how to design your evaluation to build the evidence base for your work. A correlational study looks at the relationship between an intervention and an outcome. This type of study shows how outcomes may vary with the receipt of the intervention. Note that intervention is a general term that can refer to any critical component of a project, as well as a group of critical components. An intervention can be a process, product, strategy, practice, program, or policy. Statistical controls for selection bias are the methods researchers use to compare subjects, such as students, who are similar, except one group, the treatment group, received the intervention, and another group, the comparison group, did not. The risk of selection bias is a concern because if the groups being compared aren't similar, then the differences between the groups might not be due to the intervention, but due to something else. Here we see the two evidence levels referenced in the NIA. Applications will be evaluated based on the use of these levels of evidence upon entry and upon exit. Evidence upon entry requires the project demonstrates a rationale, which again means the applicant has identified a key component in the project that, based on high quality research, the applicant hypothesizes is critical to achieving the relevant outcomes. Exit evidence describes relationships between the key project components and the relevant outcomes. This helps with making connections between the activities or strategies in the project and the outcomes you plan to measure in your evaluation. We expect to see applications that propose evaluations that can build evidence around project components at the promising evidence level. It might be helpful to distinguish the difference between demonstrates a rationale and promising evidence. When applicants are discussing demonstrates a rationale, that is the theory of action for their entire project, using a logic model to help describe why they designed it in the way that they did. In the section describing promising evidence, we expect to see applicants describe how they will design a study based on at least one critical component and one relevant outcome in their logic model that meets the definitions described previously. In this case, evidence is the desired output. If you'd like more information about demonstrates the rationale and promising evidence, you may visit the National Center for Education Evaluation and Regional Assistance, NCEE website, which gives technical assistance on both topics. Through the NCEE, you'll find resources available at the What Works Clearinghouse, Regional Educational Laboratories, Evaluation Studies, and the Education Resources Information Center, or ERIC. You may also view Heppenkamp Technical Assistance resources available on the Heppenkamp websites identified on the last slide of this presentation. Now I'll hand it back to Jessica.
Thank you, Katrina. Now that we've discussed the selection criteria, we'll now go over each part of the application. This slide lists each part of the application. We'll begin with Part 1, Standard Documents. In order to expedite the review process, it is recommended that your electronic application be organized in the following manner and include the following parts. Instructions for all parts and forms of the application are found either on the following pages of the application package or individually for each form on grants.gov. The application for federal assistance, that is Form SF-424, and the ED supplemental form for SF-424 require basic identifying information about the applicant and the application. Please provide all requested applicant information, including your name, address, email address, unique identity identifier, and unique entity identifier, that is the UEI, and a taxpayer identification number, that is the TIN. When applying electronically via grants.gov, you will need to ensure that the UEI number you enter on your application is the same as the UEI number your organization used when it registered with sam.gov. Please do not attach any narratives, supporting files, or application components to the standard form, that is SF-424. Although this form accepts attachments, the department will only review materials and files attached in accordance with the instructions provided within this application. Lastly, for number 18 in the SF-424, please enter the amount requested or to be contributed during the first funding and budget period by each contributor. The value of in-kind contribution should be included on appropriate lines as applicable. It's important to note that applications may request at the most $475,000 for a HEP award and $475,000 for a CAMP award. Additionally, the minimum amount to apply for either a HEP or CAMP grant is $180,000. Applications that request more than the maximum may be rejected, and applications that request less than the minimum amount will be rejected. Applications must provide sufficient detail for use of federal and non-federal funds in the budget narrative and include line item detail for budget expenses for all non-federal funds. All blank answers will be interpreted as zero and would be considered below the minimum in the federal funds table. Please refer to this slide for additional information on Form ED-524. Next, we will review the indirect cost information on the ED-524 form, Section A. This section is to be completed by the business office of your organization. The organization should have a current indirect cost rate agreement, that is ICRA, with the federal government if they claim indirect costs. The ICRA should include the cognizant government agency. If there is no ICRA or the ICRA is out of date, the entity has 90 days to submit evidence that the applicant is seeking an ICRA. HEP and CAMP are training programs that are limited to an 8% or lower indirect cost rate. Next, we will review the activities and costs. All activities and costs associated with those activities for the proposed projects are reviewed by OME staff to determine if they are reasonable, allowable, and allocable. See the Education Department General Administrative Regulations and OMB guidance for federal financial assistance. If activities or costs are found to be unreasonable, unallowable or not allocable, they may be reduced or removed from your grant. Next, we will review cost sharing. Neither the HEP or CAMP program statute nor regulations require cost sharing or matching. Any applicant that proposes to use non-federal funds in its application and is awarded a grant must provide those funds for each year that the funds are proposed. Non-federal funds must be non-federal and cannot come from another federally funded source. If you list the funds in Part B of ED 524, you must explain the funds in a separate Part C for non-federal funds. The same cost principles that apply to federal funds apply to non-federal funds. If you propose non-federal funds, you will be required to provide those non-federal funds for each year of the grant that you propose them. This is necessary to maintain the integrity of the competition, since readers consider these non-federal contributions when scoring applications. Next, we will review the project abstract. This is Part 3. The project abstract should include a concise, that is one double-spaced description of the following information, preferably in the following order: the goals and expected outcomes, the primary activities to be accomplished by the grant recipient, the number and location of proposed sites, whether the applicant has a current HEP or CAMP grant, and how the invitational preference priorities are being addressed as applicable. Next, we will review Part 4, that is the project narrative. The department recommends that applicants limit the application narrative to no more than 25 pages. The recommended page limit does not apply to the cover sheet, the budget section, including the narrative budget justification, the assurances and certifications, the one-page abstract, the resumes, the bibliography, or the letters of support. An application will not be disqualified if it exceeds the recommended page limit. There are no selection criteria associated with page limits. Please also note that appendices should contain the job descriptions, duties, and minimum qualifications for key personnel positions. Applicants should provide resumes of key personnel in the attachments and appendices section. These again are not included in the 25-page length. As a note, an application will not be disqualified if it exceeds the recommended page limit, and there are no selection criteria associated with page limits. Next, we will review Part 4. This is the recommended formatting of project narratives and abstracts. A page is 8.5 inches by 11 inches on one side only, with 1-inch margins at the top, bottom, and both sides. Double space that is no more than 3 lines per vertical inch, all text in the application narrative, including titles, headings, footnotes, quotations, references, and captions, as well as all text in charts, tables, figures, and graphs. Use a font that is either 12 point or larger or no smaller than 10 pitch, that is characters per inch, and use one of the following fonts, either Times New Roman, Courier, Courier New, or Arial. Next, I will turn it over to Dylan.
Thank you, Jessica. Part 5 of the application is the budget narrative. So the budget narrative is an itemized budget breakdown for each project year, and it identifies the nature and amount of the proposed expenditures. Applicants should provide sufficient detail to enable reviewers and project staff to understand how requested funds will be used, how much will be expended, and the relationship between the requested funds and project activities and outcomes. Department of Education staff will perform a cost analysis of each recommended project to ensure that the costs relate to the activities and objectives of the project and are reasonable, allowable, and allocable. The department may delete or reduce costs from the budget during this review. One additional note on the budget is that the administration's Good Jobs Initiative, led by the Department of Labor, is focused on providing information to workers, employers, and government to promote good jobs for all workers. The department encourages applicants for grants under this program to consider in their budget and personnel planning for the proposal of the use of funds in ways that would improve job quality and create access to good jobs for all working people. Additional information about the Good Jobs Initiative and the department's Good Jobs Principles for Education is available at the link shown on this slide. Part 6 is other attachments. So if the project director and key personnel have been selected and identified in the application, applicants will provide job descriptions with minimum required qualifications and brief resumes that describe the unique qualifications for the responsibilities the key personnel will carry out under the project. If the project director and key personnel have not been selected, applicants simply provide the job descriptions with the minimum required qualifications for key personnel positions. The department will review these job descriptions when approving key personnel changes. The other attachment section is also where applicants will include a copy of their indirect cost rate agreement. Applicants may also provide letters of support from organizations specifically referenced in the project narrative that will provide significant collaboration to the project. And finally, applicants may also include references and bibliographies, though this is optional. Part 7, Assurances and Certifications. Applicants should be certain to complete all required assurances and certifications in grants.gov and include all required information in the appropriate place on each form. The assurances and certifications required for this application are the disclosure of lobbying activities, the grants.gov certification regarding lobbying, and the GEPA form, as well as the assurances that we've already discussed on previous slides. Please be sure to read the full text of the NIA in the application package for additional information. One note on the GEPA changes is that the department released a new GEPA form that went live on grants.gov on April 3rd, 2023. This updated form includes 4 questions. In their responses, applicants have the flexibility to determine and define the barriers to equitable access and equitable participation. Applicants are also required to provide a timeline, including targeted milestones for addressing the barriers. Part 8 of the application is the intergovernmental review of federal programs. So the HEP and CAMP programs fall under the rubric of the Executive Order 12372 and federal regulations in 34 CFR Part 79. And these require that grant applicants contact state single points of contact for information on how this works. Multi-state applicants should follow procedures specific to each state. Further information can be found in the application package. Other factors in selecting the awards. Now that we've gone over the selection criteria in the application itself, we would like to know that in reviewing applications in any discretionary grant competition, the secretary may consider the past performance of the applicant in carrying out a previous award, such as the applicant's use of funds, achievement of project objectives, and compliant with grant conditions, as well as whether the applicant failed to submit a timely performance report or submitted a report of unacceptable quality. Additionally, the secretary may impose specific conditions on a grant if the applicant is not financially stable, has a history of unsatisfactory performance, has a financial or other management system that does not meet the regulatory standards, has not fulfilled the conditions of a prior grant, or is otherwise not responsible. Geographic distribution and remainder of funds. Because the HEP and CAMP programs may receive more than $40 million in appropriations for FY 2025, there are two additional factors that may affect the number and distribution of grants. The first is that after awarding 45% of the appropriated funds to each program, the U.S. Department of Education will award the remainder of the available funds to HEP and CAMP projects based on the number, quality, and promise of the applications. The second is that in making awards under this program, the Secretary may take into consideration the need for geographic distribution of projects when making awards. The Secretary may consider the need to provide equitable geographic distribution of HEP and CAMP programs when two or more applicants receive the same score at the funding cutoff for this competition. The Secretary determines that a geographic region is overserved by current HEP or CAMP projects. The Secretary determines that a geographical region is underserved by current HEP or CAMP projects, or two or more applicants propose to operate similar HEP or CAMP projects in the same geographical region. At this time, we'd like to reemphasize a couple components. On this slide, you'll find funding opportunity numbers as well as the grants.gov support information for any questions on the uploading and submission of your application. We'd like to again encourage you to start your application early and carefully check your Ed 524 forms. The application submission deadline is November 13th, 2024, and there are no exceptions to this deadline, so please be sure to account for any unexpected delays or issues. Thank you so much for attending the FY 2025 HEP and CAMP pre-application webinar. Along with other competition-related items, will be posted on each program's application pages at the link on this slide. Should you have any questions regarding this webinar or competition-related questions, please feel free to email the inbox hepcampfy25@ed.gov. Thank you again.